Horse speed America, the last generation who could still say, we don't need anything from you. Imagine it's 1883. You wake up before dawn. It's silent. You can hear the frost cracking on the window panes. Your breath hangs in the air as you pull your boots on, stiff and cold from the mud from yesterday. There's no thermostat. There's no internet. You walk out to the barn. Early morning starlight. The only glow clump coming is from your lantern with oil that you've rendered yourself from sunflowers you grew and you pressed in a shed out back. This isn't a romance novel. This is survival math. Your nearest neighbor is 3 miles away. The sheriff, when you need him, is a day's ride by horseback. The general store where you might buy sugar or nails if you have cash, which you mostly don't, is a 2-day wagon trip that you maybe make twice a year. You are, by modern standards, catastrophically isolated. But you are also, by that same measure, terrifyingly free. You don't owe anyone for anything. You don't owe anyone for heat. You don't owe anyone for transportation. The horse that pulls your plow runs on hay from your field. The fire that's cooking your food burns wood from your own timber. If you're clever, your tractor, if you have one, runs on alcohol from the fermented grain that you made in your steel. You are the end of a 10,000-year tradition, the producer who is also the power source. This is the world we lost in 23 years, not gradually, not gently, not in a single generation. We went from we make everything we need to we depend on everything that they sell. And they made sure that we could never go back. That world was between 1880 and 1890. Rural America was still a frontier society. Infrastructure was a rumor. Overland travel averaged 3 to 8 miles per hour. Horse speed. Because horses were the standard. Horsepower is still the standard today in 2025. Mail existed, and lost was a common status, not unlike today. Law enforcement was you, your neighbors, and whoever brought a shotgun to the meeting. This wasn't paradise. You lived with permanent knowledge that one drought could starve your children, one infected wound could kill you, one late freeze could wipe out a year's work. Wolves take livestock, neighbors feud for decades, medical care was whiskey and a prayer. But with absolute clarity, no corporation in New York could turn a dial and freeze you out of your own life. You controlled the means of production of food, of power, of movement. Energy wasn't a commodity, it was a process. You grew it, cut it, pressed it, fermented it. A farmer in Kansas could grow sorghum, ferment it into alcohol, and run his equipment without ever touching cash. Ranchers in Texas could press cottonseed oil and burn it in lamps. And this wasn't theory, it was just another Tuesday. So when did the world tilt? On January 10th of 1901, the earth screamed. Spindletop well in Beaumont, Texas. It didn't just strike oil, it erupted 150 feet into the air. It produced 100,000 barrels a day, more oil in 24 hours than any well in history. The ground literally bled black gold, and overnight oil became cheaper than dirt. Price collapsed from $2 a barrel to 3 cents. So refineries materialized like mushrooms after cow shit. Railroad magnates who had been quietly bought out by oil interests suddenly found it inefficient to transport anything else. Banks started writing loans for modern petroleum-powered equipment, but not for risky homemade alternatives. This wasn't market force, this was price shock war. They didn't need to prove petroleum was better. They just needed to make everything else economically impossible. Within 5 years, the infrastructure for ethanol, plant oils, local fuel production, still in its infancy, was starved out of investment, rail access, and political oxygen. It didn't die of natural causes. It was suffocated by design. The dreamers who saw it coming. In 1892, a German engineer named Rudolf Diesel built something impossible. An engine that could run on peanut oil. Not a gimmick. As the primary design. In 1900, he stood before the crowd at the Paris Exposition and ran his engine on 100% pure peanut oil, achieving a 75% thermal efficiency while steam engines wheezed at less than 10%. Diesel didn't just want to build an engine, he wanted to liberate farmers. In a 1912 speech, the year before he vanished from a ship under mysterious circumstances, he said, quote, "The use of vegetable oils for engine fuels may seem insignificant today, but such oils may become, in the course of time, as important as petroleum and the coal tar products in the present time." He wasn't selling oil. He was selling independence. He wanted the farmer in Bavaria to power his tractor with grapeseed that he grew himself, cutting the banks and the railroad barons clean out of the equation. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Henry Ford was building a similar vision from a different angle. In 1896, the quadricycle ran on pure ethanol. Wrap your head around that. The Model T, the car that put America on wheels, came with an adjustable carburetor specifically designed to run on alcohol. And in 1925, Ford told the New York Times, "The fuel of the future is going to come from fruit, like the sumac, but by the road, or from apples, weeds, sawdust, almost anything. There is fuel in every bit of vegetable matter that can be fermented." Think about that. The most important industrialist of the 20th century was telling farmers that they could power their future with potatoes. 1 acre of potatoes, he calculated, could produce enough alcohol to run farm machinery for 100 years. And this was not a side project, this was the plan until the plan became impossible. Was this a quiet war on self reliance? Because here's where the story gets dark. In 1862, the federal government imposed a $2.08 per gallon tax on alcohol. Officially, this was to fund the Civil War. Unofficially, it made homemade fuel alcohol more expensive than kerosene. A farmer in Iowa could produce ethanol for pennies, but the tax made it double the price of petroleum. Henceforth, the war ended, the tax didn't. By 1906, farmers were begging for relief. A movement rose to repeal the tax on non beverage alcohol. It partially succeeded, but the damage was done. The infrastructure had atrophied. Banks wouldn't finance unapproved fuel systems. And then came the knockout punch, Prohibition. The Volstead Act didn't just ban whiskey, it criminalized any alcohol production not licensed and federally inspected. To get a fuel alcohol permit, you had to submit to FBI inspections, denature your product with poison, and maintain paperwork that would choke a lawyer. The regulatory burden was so crushing that small-scale production became economically absurd. Introduce the moonshiners, those romanticized outlaws. They weren't just making hooch. Many were producing high-proof fuel alcohol for their equipment. Remember White Lightning? This stuff could run a car. When federal agents raided stills, they weren't just enforcing morality, they were enforcing dependence. Every bust was a message: you will buy our fuel, you will not make it, you will stay in the system. John D. Rockefeller didn't need to lobby for prohibition. He funded the Anti-Saloon League, knowing full well that alcohol fuel was the real threat. Standard Oil's 0% control of refining capacity meant they could dictate terms to, or 100% control of refining capacity meant they could dictate terms to railroads, banks, and politicians. So they didn't just win the market, they rewrote the rules so no one else could even play. The unraveling, what it feels like to lose. By 1920, the farmer who once fueled his own tractor was now taking out a bank loan for gas. By 1930, he was buying fertilizer from the same company that sold him fuel. And by 1940, he was locked into crop contracts, equipment financing, and pesticide schedules. And this wasn't progress, it was a debt trap. Wearing a lab coat. Look up Monsanto, look up DuPont. Each innovation, mechanization, chemical agriculture, centralized processing, they all came with a price. You had to borrow to afford it, and you had to keep borrowing to maintain it. The New Deal, for all its good intentions, permanently embedded this system. Federal agriculture policy favored scale. Scale required capital. Capital required banks. Banks required collateral. And collateral meant you could never stop producing for the market, even when the market was killing you. And so by 1950, small farms are evaporating. By 1980, rural America had become a supply depot for industrial agriculture, a place you extracted calories from, not a community you built from within. And the autonomy of 1880 wasn't just gone, it was just unthinkable. We tell ourselves this was inevitable, but it wasn't. It was completely engineered. The tools they dreamed of, but they never held. Now here's where the story pivots. Rudolf Diesel, Henry Ford were right about the vision, but wrong about the timing. There were They were building decentralized fuel systems with 1910 technology, 1900s technology. And here we are in 2025. But they needed infrastructure that didn't exist, sensors that hadn't been invented, automation that was still science fiction. And we have all of that now. Cheap sensors can monitor fermentation. AI can optimize fuel yields from local feedstock. Micro manufacturing lets you build small scale refineries that could fit in a barn. Edge computing decentralizes decision making. Blockchain can create local energy markets without middlemen. For the first time in history, the technical barriers are gone. And for the first time in over 100 years, the question isn't, can we produce local fuel? It's, why are we still paying people to make us dependent? So this is where the word gets dangerous, not physically, politically. But when you can produce your own fuel, you start asking, what else can you produce? You own food processing. You own water purification. Your own communication network. Each step takes you towards self-reliance and a step away from the legacy economic model. And they might notice the choices in front of us. We're not going back to 1880. The world's brutal, precarious, unjust in ways we won't accept, but we can't take what was functional about it, the autonomy, the local control, the ability to say no, and build it into the 21st century without technology. And now the technology is here. The knowledge is open source. Economics finally makes sense again. The system won't change by itself. So every time someone like Tyler Pertz at Range Sustain Tech in Gillette, Wyoming, he's a part of a small, growing group of rural innovators and engineers, agriculturalists, farmers, and ranchers using crypto mining not as a financial asset, but as a heat recovery technology for agricultural and ranching operations. So on his working ranch, Tyler currently heats his workshop lab. We've nicknamed it the Cyber Ranch, with 2 immersion-cooled Bitcoin miners integrated directly into his building's HVAC system. The captured waste heat supports a radiant floor heating loop as well, and it provides a reliable warmth through the Wyoming winters without relying solely on propane or electric resistant heat. His setup demonstrates real-world proof of concept, and that decentralized point of use computation can displace traditional heating fuels while giving farmers and ranchers a dual-purpose asset, thermal energy and hashing power. Tyler's collaborators and team are exploring simplified single miner home heating design with long-term aim of offering low-cost, locally owned thermal infrastructure for ranchers, farmers, and rural households who now face both high energy costs and increasing pressure from centralized utilities. In an age where America has steadily lost autonomy, Range Sustain Tech represents a return to what traditional agrarian life once embodied: energy generated on site, owned outright, and serving the people in the community who live on the land. I know Tyler's philosophy of releasing gate kept knowledge, open source it to the community is the future. And you can do it yourself, or Range Sustain Tech is happy to help. The door the oil industry nailed shut in 1901 was brute forced open with crypto technology, 256-bit government encryption, post-combustion engineering, and as a sustainable heat recovery, it's disruptive infrastructure of the future. Like every time a farmer installs solar with battery backup, she's not just saving money, she's declaring independence from the grid that profits from her dependence. Every time a community starts a local energy co-op, that's not just sharing resources, they're building parallel economies that don't have to answer to Wall Street. So this is the value for you. You're not powerless. You don't need to wait for policy. You don't need to wait for permission. You can start where you are and with what you have. Reclaim just one piece at a time. Maybe it's a small still for your fuel alcohol. Maybe it's a contract with a local solar installer. Maybe it's just learning history so you can teach your neighbors that the game is rigged by design. But rigged games only work when people keep playing. So the line that you can hold. In 1880, autonomy was a necessity. You were free because no one could reach you to control you. It was brutal, but it was yours. And then you have 1901 to 1933, petroleum and policy, weaponized infrastructure. They didn't ask you to choose dependence. They made independence illegal, impractical, and then even unthinkable. 1930 to the 1980s, consolidation finished the job. Small farms didn't fail. They were liquidated by a system that requires scale to survive. Now we're in 2020, 2025, and decentralized tech is the ghost of Diesel and Ford and their dream taking form. This time, the technology exists. This time, it is scalable. This time, it's unstoppable. It's not nostalgia. It's a systems analysis of what was taken, how it was taken, and how we take it back. So I'm not here to sell you a product or a platform. I'm just here to give you the map that shows where the walls are, where the doors have always been. If you're an innovator, a policymaker, an engineer, an investor, someone who feels the system is extractive by design, you now have some historical context to see that is not your imagination. More importantly, you have technical reality to see that the alternative isn't a fantasy. It's a choice, and what you do with that choice is up to you. But know this, the system that erased rural autonomy in 23 years is betting you'll never believe you can rebuild it. So how can you use this information? If you're rural, maybe share this with your co-op, your neighbors, your county commissioner, start the conversation about local fuel sovereignty. If you're urban, understand that rural autonomy isn't about romanticizing the past. It's about building resilience that doesn't collapse when supply chains break. I live in Houston. I live in a big city. I've seen it happen. Hurricane season will do it, much less any other non probabilistic black swans. If you're an investor, the next $1 trillion market isn't in controlling resources, it's in enabling independence from the controllers. And if you're a policymaker, the regulations that killed alcohol fuel were written to protect monopolies, not people. We can do better. Independence was never given. It's always been taken. So anything that's been taken can be reclaimed. I'm Van B. Shannon. I used AI, Perplexity, and Kimmy to confirm my work and help with organizing my thoughts. And I'm out. I wish you a good evening, and may the winds be at your back.